You know, I'm going to give you a history lesson.
We got some dumbass motherfuckers floating around this country.
Stop laughing! And when I do, start.
Also, y'all did some nasty-ass jokes on my ass, too.
Funny jokes and unfunny jokes come out of the same birth.
You f***ing guys are unbelievable.
Why are you laughing?
Evening, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Why Are You Laughing, a history of comedy podcast. And today, I'm pleased to introduce to you Sam Hyde versus Tim Heidecker. And this is our second time re-recording this episode. So if I casually gloss over a point with nonchalance, just know I crushed it the first time. You would have loved the first time we did this. It was fantastic. But
you were so good.
Here we are. It was amazing. And I was excited to do this episode. I was annoyed we lost for the first take because I was excited to do this because a lot of people have requested it. Sam Hyde in general, whether it's $1 Million Extreme, Sam's sketch group, Sam as a guy, or this specific incident where his show got canceled and Tim Heidecker played a part in that. It's all been requested by a lot of people, and I didn't know a ton about Sam Hyde going into this. I've seen him at Skankfest, and I've seen him on various podcasts, and it's interesting because my take on both guys, Sam Hyde and Tim Heidecker, as a comedy fan, these two guys aren't really for me. I haven't consumed a ton of their stuff. And that's not to say they're bad. I respect and like what they do. It's just not, I'm not the audience for it necessarily. But walking away from researching and looking at the backstory of this particular topic, I'll just say that I gained a lot more respect for one of the individuals and lost a lot of respect for the others. So you can try and determine who that is by the end of this. I think it'll be pretty clear. And I also want to say that another reason I found it to be an interesting story is I think when I started the Blind Mike Project, I was a lot more into stories of cancel culture. And people argue with me on this, but I think that era has died down. I don't think we're in the same, looking to get people fired or take their shows away or any of that. I don't think we live in that world as much anymore. When you see, Shane Gillis hosting SNL or Tony Hinchcliffe on Netflix and all this stuff, I don't think we exist in that same space that we did 15, 10, even 5 years ago. But one thing I do want to make very clear, and part of the reason I find this to be a good story worth telling, is that I've heard this a lot recently where we talked a lot about it on the Blind Mike Project when Anthony Jeselnik was going around saying this. I've seen clips of like Patton Oswalt and Sarah Silverman talking about this. And it's become a popular quote now to say, hey, there's freedom of speech, but there's also consequences to that freedom of speech. And you heard that a lot during the height of cancel culture, but now you're hearing comedians say it in a way where it's like, hey, get over it. And I think they're specifically talking to like the Rogan crew and people that are still on this, like, you can't say anything anymore. And there's truth to that. Like when Anthony Jeselnik talks about it, there's truth to that, where there's always been boundaries in comedy, and it's your job as a comedian to work around those. But the reason I think Sam Hyde versus Tim Heidecker is an important story and an interesting one to talk about is that the consequences were at an all-time high and they were unnatural. Where, yes, of course there are consequences, and the consequences might be that the audience is bothered by or offended by what you say and they don't watch. But what the consequences came to be when Sam Hyde came on the air around 2016 was, I don't like it, so I will influence other people to not like it. And even the people who greenlit you, who found you talented and thought you had a message to give, I'll convince even those people that we're going to label them as racist, or sexist, misogynist, whatever the label might be. I'll intimidate them into taking you off and blacklisting you, which is a term we'll hear Sam use later in the episode. So that's why I think these stories are important to tell, because they're not necessarily as black and white as people remember them. There was a lot more to them. So for those that don't know Sam Hyde, I didn't know a ton about him a few weeks ago, but I did know of $1 Million Extreme, his sketch group, and they still do podcasts today. It's Sam Hyde, Nick Rochefort, and Charles Carroll, I believe, is the third member. I don't know as much about him. But they were absurd, surreal sketches, kind of in the style of Tim and Eric or Tim Robinson, who's very popular, guys like that. I would say the one difference between Million Dollar Extreme and maybe some of these other shows is there was a, like, I don't know if you'd say like alpha male or what. There was a much different slant politically or socially than those other shows had. Like, I think if you just watched Tim and Eric and Sam Hyde, even if the sketch wasn't inherently political in nature, you might be able to tell they're coming from different points of view socially. So I guess that would be the one difference. But by all accounts, from what I could tell, they were always funny first. These were not preachy sketches. They didn't have a message. They all seemed to be funny. Like the one I was telling Craig about was they approached a white woman to ask why women have it more difficult than men. And she starts talking about the patriarchy and all this stuff. And then they reveal that they're all in wheelchairs. So it was stuff like that I think is very funny. Like I said, not all the sketches are for me, but it was clearly based in humor. So Adult Swim agreed and Cartoon Network agreed. So they get picked up by Adult Swim, and that's kind of where our story begins, where people were none too pleased that this show had airspace.
Yeah, this is him with Gavin McInnes.
Okay, yeah. So the show has been canceled now pretty quickly after season 1, and there were, like I said, forces intervened to have that happen. It wasn't that they had no ratings, so they just gave him the boot. It was that other people started to intervene, and that's what Sam Hyde is talking about with Gavin McInnes here.
No, I what I think really happened here is there was with all this social justice, all this political correctness, it's often just someone trying to cover their tracks for something else and using it as good optics. And I think the real story here was that your bosses were in trouble for saying something sexist that was true, which is women tend not to be good at comedy. So there was already heat there. There was also a PC blogger named, what's his name, Joe Bernstein?
Something like that, Joel Bergstein or something along those lines.
So
I forgot exactly what it was.
You were a dick to him, and you made fun of him, and you said you'll never work at the New York Times. You'll always just be a blogger.
And I pissed off the wrong blogger, and he's got those Turner email connections.
Right. So he makes the show alt-right. And no one, like every time this came up, I said, which sketch do you have a problem with? No one could name a sketch. They just hear alt-right. And it really comes down to the fact that you, one of the many contributors to the show, like Trump.
Yeah, I like Trump, and I like a few. I'm not anti-white, which I think is something you have to be to be a white guy, a non-Jewish white guy. In comedy, you have to be at least secretly anti-white. All your jokes have to be about how white people suck in one way or another.
Yeah.
That's why it got the axe.
It's interesting too, because that's kind of the vibe I got from watching the $1 Million Extreme sketches, where that was kind of the message. It seemed to me very clear. And like Gavin McInnes is there. I think like Gavin McInnes to me, I never found particularly funny. Especially when he started kind of leaning into being a leader of some political movement. But when I watch Sam Hyde's stuff, it seems much more the route of like, hey, everyone's, taking the self-loathing white person role and being like, hey, aren't we awful? Let me do the opposite and tell you why everyone else is awful. Like, let me fill a void that doesn't exist in comedy right now. And to me, that's what it seemed like Sam Hyde was doing. And this was like 2016. I don't know when in the year World Peace aired. I don't think I've said even the name of the show yet. World Peace on Adult Swim. So I don't know when in the year it aired, but 2016, obviously the year Trump got elected. So even just a guy saying he supports Trump was somehow controversial at the time, even though half the country voted for him. So it was a very weird time where you were looking to ruin people. And that's something I think people have forgotten in the last few years here, where hear him talk about that Joe Bernstein, the blogger for BuzzFeed that went after him. It reminded me a lot of Seth Simons, where Seth Simons is a guy that maybe Shane wasn't nice to. You know, Shane was a jock and Seth Simons was a theater kid when they were doing open mics. So Seth Simons was like, one day I'm going to ruin this guy. I'm going to find clips that could ruin him. And if SNL hires an Asian guy, I've got clips for that. And if they hire a gay guy, I've got clips for that. Whatever it might be, I'm going to take this guy down. And Sam Hyde did kind of a similar thing where he shit on this Joe Bernstein, and Joe Bernstein said, well, I'm going to tattle on you. I'm going to go to the head of the network, and I'm going to try to get your show taken off. And this was at a time where people were very sensitive to being called racist and things like that. So it worked. And I think that's what he's talking about here, right? More about the BuzzFeed article, yeah.
Well, ultimately, the decision. So, Adult Swim's owned by Turner, and the two guys that are at the top of Adult Swim, Keith Crawford and Mike Lazo, they both loved our show. But above them is Jeff Zucker. Jeff Zucker is the guy who runs Turner, and ultimately what happened to get our show taken down was Bernstein directly emailing Jeff Zucker with the article. The article had no engagement. It had fucking like 60 fire icons or whatever BuzzFeed does for a like. Like nobody was reading this thing. It was
it was nothing.
Nobody's paying attention to this. The tweet that he put out had like 12 retweets. He emails Jeff Zucker with this thing, and it gets pulled like that. That's actually no bullshit. Swear on my life, that's what happened to get the show taken down.
And that's an interesting thing that Gavin brought up is there was no one particular sketch. I expected when I started looking more into this, I was looking for the sketch from World Peace that people had a problem with. Like, again, I might keep doing this throughout because there are some parallels. But like when Shane got canceled, the clip that went around was him talking to Matt McCusker about Chinatown. That was the clip that got him canceled. I couldn't find the sketch that people were outraged by. And it turns out, at least from Sam's telling of it, which I believe, by the way, because in 2016, as I said before, when this show started, when the Blind Mike Project started in 2021, I was very into cancel culture. If you can imagine how obsessed I was with it in 2016 at the height of it, it was something I consumed a lot of. And Sam Hyde's story was not a massive one. And I think that's because it was done in a vacuum where this guy wrote a BuzzFeed article that no one wrote, but he was able to get it to Jeff Zucker, who was afraid of being called racist. And this is what I'm talking about when I say the consequences don't match the crime, where like there is no sketch you can point to that should clearly have them thrown off the air unless you just don't like everything they do. If you go, well, hey, this sketch and this sketch and this sketch and this sketch and this sketch, they're all offensive to me. It's like, well, then you don't think they should be on the air to begin with. But Adult Swim did. And they're owned by the same corporation that owns CNN. Right. So do you think CNN, or their parent company, looked at $1 Million Extreme and said, oh, these are Nazis that wear swastikas and say racist things. Let's put them on the air. What do you say? So, like, there's clearly someone that thought they were funny that was convinced they weren't funny by a blogger and by people who were offended. And that's the main issue that I have with it.
Next, we get into Brett Gelman.
Okay, so Tim Heidecker is the main focus of today, but the guy that got the ball rolling and the guy that I think Sam really blames, aside from Joe Bernstein, is Brett Gelman. And Brett Gelman's one of those actors, like when you see it, you don't know his name necessarily. I think he was actually just on Rick Glassman's podcast. So I guess he's still around in some form or fashion. But when you see him, you're like, oh, yeah, I know that guy. He's been in some stuff. But I didn't know he was a personality that would make the rounds and have opinions like this. So apparently he was working. He had a show that was not successful on Adult Swim, and then was maybe looking for some work and found a way to get attention for himself. And we're about to hear him explain that.
There was no act of bravery on my part. I simply posted 2 articles, and I had no idea that it would create that much of a reaction. I'm glad it did. I don't think
Do you want to give a little context, Brett, so we know what you're talking about?
They had also greenlit this show called $1 Million Extreme.
Oh, you said it.
And then I just was like I mean, it was an alt-right,
literally a neo-Nazi sketch show.
Plus, I have a major problem with that. It's literally shouldn't you have a massive problem with Adult Swim? If Sam Hyde, if it's literally a neo-Nazi sketch show, that means Sam Hyde and Nick Rochefort went to Cartoon Network, where Dexter's Laboratory aired, and said, "Hey, we're a group of Nazis. We do a neo-Nazi show, and we'd like to put it on the air, please." And they said, "All right, fine." And then Brett Gelman said, "I don't like that it's on the air," and they were like, "All right, we'll take the Nazis off." To use the term literally, I have a big problem with. I get, like Sam does say, he's a Trump supporter, so if you want to call it a right-wing show, I guess I'm fine with that. But again, I've watched the sketches. I don't know that you could even define them as that. I think it's a show created by a Trump supporter. The problem is that's not as sensational. That's not as eye-catching if you put it in a headline. If it says, Trump supporter has show greenlit by Adult Swim, you have to throw neo-Nazi in there to get people's attention.
Right. That's a big one nowadays.
Yes. Yeah. I don't think the Nazis had a lot of hit sketch shows back in the. That was more left to Charlie Chaplin and the Stooges. I don't know if Hitler was putting on too many yuck-em-ups.
Neo-Nazi sketch, and they have a neo-Nazi following. Yeah, that was the big thing. It was like, no, I'm not necessarily like. Sure, you could analyze the content of the show, but it was like they had amassed this following, and I was just like, I don't want to be part of a business that gives employment opportunities and a voice to people who are amassing a hate following online. Regardless of what their show is. I mean, if somebody is like plays a do-gooder on a television show, but then in their private life is publicly, not privately, but like is publicly on social media saying bigoted things, I would want them removed from that show. So it was like really about what they were doing publicly. Yeah. Even more so than the show. The show itself was problematic. So anyway, but I just posted these 2 articles and said that I'm not working with Adult Swim anymore.
So I actually have a major problem with that too, because now you're putting it on the fans. Where he even says in there, you can analyze the content of the show itself, which is kind of his way of saying, like, okay, fine, if you watch the show, you might not think they're Nazis, but I assure you they are. And I've decided the people who watch it are Nazis, because you'll hear a lot of this with Tim Heidecker as well. Well, how do you know they're Nazis, Brett? Well, people tweet me mean things. So therefore, I've decided everyone that watches the show is a Nazi. And it's like they were on a network with Eric Andre and Tim and Eric. Do you think those audiences fled and said, world peace is on, the $1 Million Extreme guys are on, scatter, let's get out of here, and then all the Nazis flood in? Or do you think maybe there was some crossover and maybe people are nuanced and maybe every group of people has some bad, some good, some in between, some have deplorable thoughts and some have inspiring thoughts, and a lot of people are just looking for a half hour of entertainment, and that's most of what TV audiences are. So that painting with the broad brush when they don't see the hypocrisy in that is frustrating to me. And also distancing themselves. You're going to hear a lot of this with Tim Heidecker as well, where within that clip there, Brett Gelman says, he's like, listen, I barely even did anything. All I did was tweet a couple articles. Am I glad it happened? Absolutely. So from one side, he's saying, hey, don't blame me. I didn't do anything to do this. Oh, guys, you want to praise me? Yeah, right over here. Come on, my back is... Give it a pat. Give my back a pat, would you? It was me. It was me that did it. So he's kind of talking to both audiences and saying, hey, don't blame me, but give me credit. And that's the thing I really don't like. That's going to come up a lot with Tim as well.
In this photo that's on the screen, it looks like he's got like a real big problem with Iran. And typically, people that have been through it in the past or their family's been through it in the past don't as loosely call people Nazis, from what I get.
I would imagine so.
But this one is more of him talking about the public outcry.
Okay, yeah. So this is more about like what actually happened to get this show taken off.
Trolls didn't like that. I mean, that was the last of any type of communication I had with the network. I certainly didn't force the network to do anything, but other people, there was a big outcry, and I'm glad there was.
Yeah.
So yeah, and then
if I can just let me clarify here. Brett Gelman is saying I didn't force the network to do anything, and that's true. He's not Jeff Zucker's boss, so he has no power at Cartoon Network or Adult Swim. What he did do is publicly say, and this is at a time you heard Gavin McGinnis reference this as well. This is at a time where people were pointing at Adult Swim and saying they don't hire enough women. So they were under fire for that already. And then Brett Gelman comes out and says, I'm not going to work with this network anymore as long as they have these racists on. And then a group of journalists that don't do their job and just hear the word racist say, oh, God, there are racists on Adult Swim? Let me write about it. So, no, he didn't have a gun to their head. He didn't have threat of firing anybody. But from a public standpoint, he did put a tremendous amount of pressure on them because he said, hey, Adult Swim hires Nazis. And then the people at Adult Swim have to say, hey, why do you hire Nazis? And they have to be like, oh, we don't. They're just, God damn it. We're behind the 8 ball on this one. I guess we'll just fire them. So right. That's the pressure that Brett Gelman applied. Yeah, technically, there's nothing he could have done, but he was able to manipulate cowards. That's how I view it. So
I would just give the people at Adult Swim advice. Just ignore stupid shit.
Yeah, and I think you're starting. I give Netflix a lot of credit because when this stuff, there were literal protests about Dave Chappelle, and Ted Sarandos and Netflix said, hey, we're just going to put the special on. We're all going to get through this together. We're also going to have shows that say white people are the devil. You can watch those if you'd like. But we're going to have Dave Chappelle on this. and everyone was fine afterwards. And now they put Kill Tony on, and people will be like, hey, he called Puerto Rico garbage. And Netflix is like, I know. Don't watch it if you don't want to. But it's still going to be on. You can just avoid it. So I give Netflix a lot of credit for that, but not many networks were doing that back then.
Let's finish up this clip here.
Okay. And I'm glad there was.
Yeah.
So yeah, and then I was like heavily trolled and attacked, and I was just like, who the,
It turns out he's the victim after all. That's a shame.
That's more like it from.
Well, it's a shame. It's a shame that he had to go through that. And again, no one ever really said they go, oh, I was the victim. I got shit online. It's like, you don't think Sam was called a racist? Again, to use the Shane example, he was featured in articles that in the picture of the article, if you click on it, you see Bill Cosby, Harvey Weinstein, Shane Gillis. And it's like, well, these three men to me have nothing in common. But you've decided they've all done something very bad. So that's they're not giving credence to the hellfire that these guys are under when you decide to put them in the spotlight like that. And Mark Norman says this a lot, and I think it's a great point, where he's like, he says that, and then he goes on to say some powerful stuff.
I'm gay.
All right. Sam Hyde is under fire and being called literally a Nazi and saying he puts Nazi propaganda in his show. And there's all this stuff about who Sam Hyde is as a guy. Then when they're proven wrong, like when it comes out, it's like he isn't all those things. He's a surrealist, absurdist, sensationalist, whatever you want to call it. Even if you want to say like an edgelord comedian at most. Once all that is like, once cooler heads prevail, the people that called him a Nazi never have to publicly apologize. You know what I mean? Like the people that brought Daniel Tosh on trial don't have to then go like, hey, the temperature's changed and I was being a bit of an asshole. They never have that day of reckoning the way the people under fire in these moments do. Like Brett Gelman never has to answer for what he does. He can go, it wasn't even really me. And that's the thing that I think is frustrating to a lot of people.
Yeah, it's very, very frustrating and annoying, especially now too. In a perfect example, I know we keep talking about Shane, about the temperature changing.
Yeah.
He got
well. Shane's a great Shane. I like using Shane because he's a great example that I think helped turn the tides. Where he got fired, went through that shit, didn't change what he's doing, and he's now bigger than all the people that shit on him.
Yeah.
But Nikki Glaser never has to come out and say, "Hey, I was wrong," or Anthony Jeselnik never has to come out and say, "Boy, I fucked up." And if they do, to Nikki Glaser's credit, she said, "I was wrong about that."
Yeah.
Privately to Shane.
Yeah.
But she doesn't have to go through a day where every article is like Nikki Glaser wrong about Shane Gillis.
Right.
You know?
But my point with that is if you listen to the clip that got him fired, he was doing a character, making fun of it or whatever. And now if you look at Netflix, like you talked about, has his show on where he says way worse things.
Right. But we've all decided, hey, we accept Shane.
Right.
And that, again, to keep using the consequence reference, like, maybe Sam Hyde would have gotten all that out in season 1 or season 2 and then kind of changed who he was. Maybe he would have toned down, or maybe as the world changed, like now Sam Hyde would be a different guy. But you kind of forced him into this box without ever letting him like fully get to express himself and change on his own.
Next we have the advertisers.
So this is ultimately always what happens is you start contacting advertisers, and I think this might be the first time we hear from Tim Heidecker.
I think he probably said something to the executives at Adult Swim, and he also told his fans to call advertisers and complain if they didn't like the show.
Damn it!
That's not exactly being neutral, but
These guys helped get the show pulled. Tim encouraged his audience to call advertisers and complain about our show.
It's a complicated thing. If you like the show, great, support the show. If you're listening and you hate this thing and you think it's evil or you think that it's spreading messages of hate, you should speak out. You should go and let the advertisers know what you think.
So that was Tim Heidecker on Office Hours Live or whatever version of that podcast. It was on. He was doing live streams on Facebook back at this, 2018-ish, or I guess 2016, as it were. But so he was doing these call-in shows on Facebook, and you hear that clip there where that's Tim Heidecker saying, "Hey, if you don't like it, let the advertisers know." I looked for more full versions of that clip because if you just hear that, it could be about anything. Like the context isn't there. I wasn't able to find that, unfortunately, so I almost even hesitated to use it. But Tim does address it later and kind of confirm what he was saying. So I don't mind saying that the hatred I have for that type of message is, again, like, I think if you want to boycott something on your own, go wild. Like hit him in the wallets to send him a message. I think there's such a difference between that and assembling an army to call over and over again because it's something you don't like. And I think Tim does have influence at that network. And what could have been done is Tim could say to Brett Gelman, who is his friend, I guess that's how this all started, is Tim and Brett are friendly. Tim could have said, like, hey, these are young guys trying to find their voice in comedy. Let them do their thing the way we got the opportunity to. But instead, Tim publicly put out a message where he said, like, hey, if you don't like it, call the advertisers and try to get him kicked off. Tim will say that's the only time he really addressed it, which, as far as I could find, is true. There was not a lot out there, unless it's been scrubbed from the internet. I couldn't find a ton of Tim, picketing outside Adult Swim or vocally going to the heads of the network and saying, get these guys off. Sam Hyde suspects that he privately voiced concern about $1 Million Extreme being affiliated with Adult Swim. Sam had, I think, 4 shows on the air at Adult Swim at this time. So he's definitely a guy who had power, and he could have stepped in and said, hey, this is another comedian. Let him do his thing. And instead, he went out of his way to at least once say, well, contact the advertisers if you don't like it. And that's not what I think a comedian's message should be, generally.
Absolutely fucking not.
Yeah.
This is talking about the hypocrisy.
I laid it out pretty well, but let's hear more about hypocrisy.
the thing is, it's hard for me to draw the line of what's mean spirited and what's not. Some of your stuff seems a little bit mean spirited, at least with the Awesome Show. And some of the people you put on there, you know what I'm talking about. Like, I mean, I understand where you're helping people and you're putting yourself on the line. You're making yourself look bad. And the same. Right, I've heard you say that in interviews.
Yeah. I know what you mean. And listen, I think there's choices we probably made that I wouldn't make now. But you know, that was a different time. We were younger and we were experimenting and we were trying new things, and there wasn't a lot of time to self-reflect about what we were doing.
But sometimes I wonder if there is some hypocrisy there. You know,
in what sense?
I mean, a lot of this right now is coming from MDE, right?
I'm not going to comment on the aesthetic value of the show. The only thing I will say is fans of the show that come to me online are abusive and hateful and not fun. So that seems to be, must be a reflection on whoever's making the show.
I had a quick question.
Hold on. That doesn't seem particularly fair.
No.
The fans were mean, so the guys that made the show must be mean. It's like, I don't know if that. I don't know how you're getting there, or if you even have vetted that these are fans of the show, or just people that want to troll you. But it's not. That's not an argument I love, because I agree with Tim. I think everyone can agree with that. The idea that you did stuff when you were younger that you look back now and just cringe. And I don't even mean offensive stuff. I just mean anything. Look at old tweets you posted or old videos you made, anything you were involved in when you were in your 20s, if you're now in your 30s or 40s or whatever. Look back at what you were doing 10, 15, 20 years ago, and there's a good chance you might like cringe at some of it. The opinions you had or what you thought was funny, whatever. And Tim's like, hey, but that was a different time, and I grew out of that. Well, that's how all of time works, you know? Like, everyone's older than they were at every other point of their lives. I won't say you, because Tim didn't do it, but what the people that got Sam taken off did is not give Sam the opportunity to grow and change. Sam never had that chance. Tim just showed like he has a hit show that had cultural impact and relevance and found an audience. And over the course of time, he looks back at some of that stuff that built his audience and said, I would do it differently now. Well, he didn't afford Sam and Nick and Charles that same opportunity. He said, hey, call the advertisers and get them taken off if you don't like it. And I imagine Tim would not have enjoyed that if some activist group said, hey, let's get Tim and Eric taken off because we don't like what they're doing. We don't like their comedy.
Exactly.
A statement.
Oh, what is the statement?
Sam Hyde.
Oh, I'm not talking about him today. These people, this cult, I'll call them a cult now. They're so obsessed with me. They're such super fans. They always make these videos from office hours here. The only people that watch the show, I think, are these people.
I don't even know the lore of how he got people so pissed off at him.
So Sam thinks that there's basically the things Tim did got the internet inspired. Basically, Sam is saying at a certain point, this wasn't even world peace fans or $1 Million Extreme fans. These were people online that found a lol cow, that found a guy that they could bully, basically, that would react to it. And you hear it there where Sam's like, well, they're being mean to me online. Yeah, that's what the internet is. A lot of people are assholes. Go to any subreddit of any podcast. I think we said this last time, and Craig gave the caveat of if the podcast has been on for more than a year, which I think is a fair timeline. Find a subreddit of any podcast that's existed more than a year. I challenge you to find one where all the posts are positive and love the show. It's an impossible task. Don't waste your time doing it. Every subreddit hates the podcast that they talk about. So that's every online community, Tim. It's just the first time you're being subjected to it at the scale you are. And he held a lot of resentment to Sam for that.
And if you find a positive post, read the comments.
Right. They'll tell her, hey, gay, get out of here.
Yeah, exactly. Next, we have a parody song by Tim Heidecker called I'm
Yes. Yeah, so this is what Sam thinks got a lot of the focus on him. I'm sorry, Tim started reacting to a lot of the trolling that he got, And I get what he's trying to do here with this song, but I don't think it had the intended effect.
I'm a fag. Who wants blacks to live amongst us? And Arabs to have equal rights. I have no love of country. White folks are all bad, but when the all right folks attack me, it makes me sad. I am a cut. I am a libtard.
So I actually get what Tim's trying to do, and I don't think it's as douchey as people make it out to be, where like he's trying to own a lot of those things that people were calling him at that time.
Right.
I think where you get into trouble is, and this is something that the left and like liberal comics have just not figured out, except I was like, guys like Jon Stewart are very good at it. But there's not a ton of examples of guys who are great at it where if you're liberal, you think it's a joke, or like you think it's like funny to be like, oh, sorry, I care about human beings and equal rights. And it's like, yeah, you're saying that you're godlike and the other people aren't, or you care about humanity and the other people don't. Mm-hmm. It's just a turnoff to half the country to be like, oh, well, I'm part of the team that cares about humans. It's like, yeah, we do. We just want to pay less in taxes, man. You know,
right?
So I think that was the turnoff that Tim had there. Although, like in hindsight, I don't think that song is as douchey as people made. I get what he's trying to do at the very least, but he took a beating over that song. Much like Moshe Kasher tried to do something also. He made a song called Problematic, and people really went to town. And he was like, no, I was kind of trying to make fun of. I think it got misunderstood his intention, but it comes off like you're just waving your arms to be like, look how good a person I am.
Right. And with Tim for sure, but I think the problem is also though everything he's saying about in that song would be like the volume turned up to 10, but in reality he is at like a 6 or a 7.
Right.
So
well, and Sam's point with that song was like the internet found that. That's not my fans. Now it's out of control. The internet found that and said, "Oh, look at Tim. Look what Tim's embarrassing himself." That's not $1 Million Extreme fans. That's he'll talk about it later, but like that's all of the internet.
I was a big fan of Tim and Eric. I felt all these things about Tim, and I didn't even know about this Sam Hyde beef. So,
right.
For example, I guess.
Yeah, well, and I think you said when we recorded this the first time that where's Eric Wareheim? Like he just stays out of it, which I think is probably smart. I'm sure Eric has all the same beliefs as Tim, or a lot of the same beliefs as Tim, but it seems like he knows as an absurdist comedic mind, maybe it's not good that I talk about all these issues because it'll kind of kill everything else I did.
Right, and or he either that or he knows his politics are no one else's business. Like, who gives a shit?
Or you could go the other way where, I could be wrong about. I don't know a ton about Sam. Like I said, I've seen his act at Skankfest and stuff like that. I'm assuming he voted for Trump just because he said that. But when you hear him talk about it, there is a like beefed up absurdist angle to even that.
Right.
Like even if he's serious about voting for Trump, he will talk about it in a comedic style. And I think that's what a lot of people forgot for a good chunk of the last decade or so. But what's the next clip?
Next we have Tim's campaign.
Okay, so this is like I said, there's not a ton of stuff out there that is evidence against what Tim is saying. Tim is basically saying like, hey, I never really did anything. And Sam kind of holds on to that one clip where he says, go after the advertisers, which is, I think, egregious from my perspective. But Sam also says, well, I think privately you went to the people at Adult Swim where you have a lot of power. And Tim is arguing that here. Is this when Sam's on the phone, I think?
I believe so. The next few clips are.
Yeah, so Sam calls in to Office Hours Live and is actually able to confront Tim on a lot of this stuff.
Didn't you want the show canceled?
I didn't really have a strong feeling about it either way. The only shows I don't want canceled are my own.
And Tim took a lot of shit for that comment. I saw it used in a lot of compilations. If you just search Tim Heidecker versus Sam Hyde, there's a lot of compilations of a lot of this stuff. And I saw that quote used where it's like, the only shows I care about are my own. People kind of cited that as hypocritical. I think, again, he's clearly joking there. I don't mind that from Tim. I think he's trying to be funny in an uncomfortable situation.
Trying to break the ice so they can just talk rather than yell at each other.
A little bit. He's definitely looking down his nose at Sam for a lot of this conversation.
Mm.
So I get why Sam didn't take the bait, but he is trying to be somewhat affable, I think.
Didn't you campaign against our show? Didn't you talk to people to tell them you didn't like the show?
Nope. Sam, I've talked about this for the past 3 weeks in the show. I've been very honest and forthright about my experience with the show and with your audience. And, that's really all I have to say about it. I've been pretty straightforward about it. I'm sorry that impression exists online from a bunch of, Reddit posts and fantasy.
You've been pretty supportive of the effort to get the show pulled down. Because why? Because
How
it's
so?
racist. Because I wore blackface, which Sarah Silverman does 10 times a year.
How did it? But there's no evidence of me doing anything that there's no. What have I been doing? It's all innuendo and hearsay.
And I get what Tim is trying to say, and I think he's correct in saying if we're building a case here, you could say Brett Gelman is maybe the most guilty, and Tim at worst is an accomplice. He says, hey, I'm supporting my buddy. I guess if you have a problem with it, contact the advertisers. Tim, as far as we know, is an accomplice, unless he went to executives at Adult Swim, which he may have, but he's vehemently denying that over and over again. In all the clips I found of Tim, he always denies that he did that. So, I don't know enough about Tim Heidecker. He might say, I went to Adult Swim execs because I don't want that message on my network or whatever. I wouldn't be shocked if Tim said something like that. So I kind of believe him, but none of us know. We may never know for sure what Tim's involvement was with the executives. But what Tim is neglecting to say is that he's not owning this, that he supported Brett Gelman. He said, contact the advertisers. And every time it comes up, he says, well, these guys seem racist and I wouldn't want that on my network. And he's, to use a cancel culture term, he's dog whistling to a lot of people saying, hey, we got to get these monsters off the air. They're Nazis, for God's sake. So Tim's trying to distance himself from that he is complicit in. And that's the part he's not acknowledging that I think is frustrating Sam.
And here they are talking about Brett Gelman.
Okay, yeah. So this is that relationship that I talked about.
You've been supportive of your buddy Brett Gelman.
Yeah, exactly. The word buddy is key here. I'm supportive of whatever he wants to do. He said he doesn't want to he doesn't want to make shows for Adult Swim anymore, not just because of your show, but because of their issues with women. And I've got my own thoughts about that. People were asking me what I thought. Hold on, let me finish my thought. When people were asking me what I thought about Gelman making his statement, I said, I support my friend because I support whatever he wants to do. And then I said, I'm not going to, because they're saying, why don't you quit too? So I'm not going to fucking quit. That's stupid. That's all I said.
Shouldn't absolutely be employing more women though? Shouldn't you be?
We employ a shitload of women. We employ a shitload of women. Half the people on the Decker show right now are women. And we work every day to get more women shows on the air. We pitch shows with women. We bring women in.
Yeah. So Sam's contention there is you supported your buddy. You supported this guy who was going after us. And I think Sam's big gripe is that, according to Sam, Brett Gelman is a guy who wasn't working at Adult Swim. His show got taken off, and Brett Gelman comes out and says, I'm not going to work with Adult Swim anymore if they don't take $1 Million Extreme off the air. And that's kind of like me saying, hey, I'm not going to work with Barstool Sports until they get rid of Kevin Clancy. And it's well, you don't work at Barstool Sports, so you're kind of just grandstanding for no reason,
Right.
So I think that's what it feels like to Sam. That was frustrating. Is it wasn't a brave stance that Brett was taking. It was trying to kind of get attention for himself when it seemed like he had nothing else going for him. Again, similar to the Joe Bernstein thing, where it's a guy who just didn't like what Sam represented and is like, why does that guy have a show and I don't?
Yeah, I think to put this in perspective for people who might, follow the Karen Reed case, Tim Heidecker is basically Chloe the dog. Didn't kill him, wasn't the reason, but left a mark for sure.
I don't know what that means, but I'm sure it's good. Now you all get it.
Now you get it. This is public perception.
Okay.
So listen, the deal with Brett Gelman is nobody liked his shit. Like, that's why he left. It's not because he was taking a stand. It's because no one was paying for his bad ideas.
Okay.
And so on the way out, he decided to really burn them as good as he could and make it some sort of social justice hero stand. But he's not. He would do anything for money. That guy Brett Gelman would do anything for a $40,000 check, man.
Okay,
he would do literally anything.
We do anything. That's the news coming in from Falls River. Sam Hyde reporting in.
Shout out Fall River. Shout out Cinema.
Sorry, I'm not in Glendale. I'm not in Echo Park. I'm not in a posh LA neighborhood. I don't have that kind of money.
Glendale is not what you think it is, my friend. It is working class. Working class,
all right,
man.
Yeah, you have a working class environment around you. I get it.
I work hard every day.
Yeah, you work hard at getting people's shows taken off the air. That's real brave.
Listen, why don't you tell your audience? Why don't you tell your audience that it's a fiction, it's a fantasy that's completely delusional thinking to think that I have that kind of power or that I have that kind of interest.
No, you do have that kind of power because you're making.
Well, half of your audience tells me that I'm irrelevant and that I'm finished and I'm worthless. And then that in the next breath, they tell me that I'm pulling strings and running the show, that I'm Mr. Hollywood. So it can't be both.
Hey,
it can't be both,
Mr.
buddy.
Hollywood. Mr. Hollywood, half of my audience tells me I'm irrelevant and whatever you
so
just
you
said.
know, you don't believe it. So
yeah, and Sam has the correct thought process here. Where I was shocked. I had not heard this phone call before looking into this episode. I don't know a ton of Tim Heidecker's work. I just know of it. Like I haven't watched all of it, but I know it exists. I know it's well respected. I know people love it. I was surprised a guy in his position that has not just been a star and stuff, that not just has a name, but has created stuff. Like he is the guy, he's the head of Absolutely, that company. Like his business, he's a businessman as well as like a performer. I was shocked that a guy in that position would have this thin a skin.
I know.
Where he's like, no, but your fans are being mean to me on Twitter. Like, I'm shocked that he had that mentality. And it's interesting to me, a guy in that position that you heard that Tim is in versus a guy, Sam Hyde, who had not even really like made it yet. Like his show got on the air briefly, but he didn't cash in. He was not you hear it. He's in Fall River at that time,
which is,
I believe, according to, for those outside of Massachusetts, I mean, it was a lovely town for my boy Cinema, but
shout out.
Yeah. But,
Fall River's so dumpy, he had to get away from it.
Well, all right. Well, I didn't realize $1 Million Extreme. I guess this is according to Justin Trudell. I don't know how accurate it is. They recorded in the same building that Vaulted Podcast Studios was in, where this podcast started.
No kidding.
In Rhode Island. Yes. Pawtucket, Rhode Island.
Wow.
I did not vet that to see if it was true, but it just gives you a little perspective into where Sam Hyde was in his career.
Yeah.
Recording podcasts in the same building that I was.
Yeah.
So that's the other interesting thing, and another parallel to Shane is Sam got canceled before he had made it. So again, you have this guy, Tim Heidecker, who has multiple shows on the air and everything, contributing to a guy who has nothing being taken off the air and called a Nazi and a racist, probably in some form for the rest of his career. And meanwhile, Tim is worried about the response that he's getting. He's worried about people being mean to him online. Like, that's a tremendous lack of perspective to me.
Oh, yeah. Next, we have Tim denying it some more.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so you are a big deal at that network. You're not an irrelevant like non-player. The
I
stuff
agree.
that you say
I agree.
Has people listen to you.
I agree.
So I have heard that you campaigned to get our show taken off the air.
That is wrong, Sam. And listen to me. It is wrong. Now, I have expressed, like I've said on the show many times, I've expressed to people there and to people around me that I've been, attacked online by people in your name. I don't know if it's you or whoever it is, but it's people saying, fine. Okay, fine. It's not you, but it's people over and over again, a coordinated, consistent, nasty, violent. No, listen, violent, death threats, all that shit coming at me. And all I've ever said to anybody about the subject was, well, that audience, has like, an issue that has an issue that doesn't seem to be dealing with. So
no, the coordinated attacks against you are a result of you expressing anti-Trump sentiments and expressing these egalitarian, all-inclusive, open borders, and that has nothing to do with our show. That's not related. So
okay, well, it's been said in the name
that you have brought screaming down upon your head has to do with your song "I'm a Cuck." It has nothing to do with me or my show.
That's
so
Sam. That song was written after months and months of people calling me every name that I said in that song. That didn't come out of nowhere. That's just a reaction.
Not my fault.
I'm not saying it's your fault.
You kind of are.
You completely are.
Yeah, you kind of are, because in fact, in there, Tim admitted he went to people at the network and even expressed thoughts about Sam's audience. And I was shocked at how Tim's lack of understanding of the internet. Mm-hmm. I couldn't believe a guy that at the time was as cutting edge and relevant. Like, when I hear people talk about Tim and Eric, they say it's like totally ahead of its time, this new weird alternative thing.
Mm-hmm.
I was surprised a guy with that brain wasn't able to understand the internet. Like, to me, that was the most shocking thing in this phone call, where Tim is blaming Sam Heidecker for everything that every nasty comment that he reads on Twitter. To me, that's a tremendous lack of understanding. And also, he does admit there, and again, it's more of this kind of tacit endorsement of calling them Nazis, where to Sam, what he's saying is, all I did was go to people and say, hey, they're promoting Nazi stuff. They're big into Nazi stuff. And all the people that follow them are Nazis. That's all I did. What's the big deal?
You better call Gillette and tell them to stop promoting on there.
Yeah, that's all I did. Who cares, Sam? Let's all move on. He said it's frustrating to hear Tim again, where he's like, all I did is keep bringing up that you guys are kind of at the root of all evil in society right now. That's all I did, is say that publicly and privately to people repeatedly. But also, like, I didn't have anything to do with getting you fired. That's my main issue with this, is he never says, no, Sam, I went to people and said, hey, the guy's a comedian. Even if you don't think he's funny, give him a chance. He says, no, I just went to people and said, like, maybe they're racist. I don't know, So that's the main issue with it, is like, you're trying to run from it, but you did contribute in some way to the problem. Here's what I'll grant Tim, if I can defend Tim a little bit. Sam is kind of treating Tim as like the main villain. And it's I saw a lot of videos where it seemed like if we did Sam Hyde versus Brett Gelman, maybe fewer people would click on it, but I think we'd have a lot more meat. Like, he's gone after Brett Gelman plenty,
Yeah.
But so like, to be, it's not like Sam is only focused on Tim, but Sam is treating Tim Heidecker like he is the main problem, when again, Tim is guilty of he's complicit in being an accomplice at worst,
Chloe the dog, right?
Exactly, a reference everyone gets.
They should,
including me.
But the reason I think he's appropriately going at Tim is, instead of being like, reaching out to those people where he's correct saying he's a big deal at that network, and be like, no, that's not true. keep the show. He stuck a knife in the heart of it instead.
Yeah. Oh, and I absolutely don't have a problem with it because you hear where Sam is calling in here. Tim's like, it wasn't even really me. But when you hear him in those other interview clips, he's like, listen, they're Nazis, and the people that follow him are Nazis. You know, what do you want from me?
Totally. Next, we have Blacklisted, and this is where we crashed last time. So we got new stuff.
All right, hopefully we get through this because Sam makes a terrific point here.
One of my friends was actively campaigning to like get a younger guy's show taken off the air. I would tell him to chill out. I would say, that's not the way to do it. It's like cheating in the war of ideas. It's like being a tattletale and not using ideas of thought to get your point across. It's kind of fucked up. It's fucked up that my show was taken off, that our show was taken off because it's politically incorrect and it's something that would have flown, 10 years ago. It would have been fine. It's fucked up.
Well, I'm sorry, dude. I've had shows canceled. Everyone gets shows canceled. You can feel bad about it. Pick yourself up. Make shit.
I'm blacklisted. I'm not canceled. I'm blacklisted. You know what that means, right?
Well, listen, this is not my fault. This is not my fault, Sam. Okay.
All right.
Nothing to do with it. This is the choices.
I hope you enjoy life.
Okay. I try to enjoy. My back is killing me. Like I said, I've gained a lot of weight. I've got my daughter has a cold right now. So I'm not walking on clouds every day.
Dude, I can't afford health insurance. What the fuck are you talking about? Your back hurts. Get my show back.
In his defense, he was trying to be funny.
Again, Tim, I think, was trying to be funny. Also, evidence there that I think Sam was in Fall River. But I think Sam makes a tremendous point there where maybe even like canceled was the wrong word to be using that at that time. Because I thought blacklisted was so appropriate where Sam is like, no. Mm-hmm. I was a guy who got my show on a network. Whatever you want to say about Adult Swim or the time slot it was on or whatever. I got that show on a network. And now you're calling me a Nazi. Do you see the extreme? It's not like Tim's like, hey, Quincy got canceled. Shows have been getting canceled since TV existed.
Right.
and Sam's like, don't you see? It's not the show getting canceled. It's that you put a stain on my name. You labeled me a racist forever now. And like I said, now in 2025, maybe we live in a time where that stigma is starting to lift off of some people. I don't think Sam Hyde is getting a network television show anytime soon. But I think there's a massive difference. You can't just go, hey, I've had shows canceled. Yeah, because no one was watching them. Not because people were told to contact the advertisers. That's a major difference.
And next we have Tim, who I don't think he covered this enough, talking about Sam's audience.
Is he? He's not going to say something negative about them, is he?
No, I think he's going to be like, you know what?
Good. I hope they sent him nice messages through this process.
I think that if you guys seem to have a very voracious audience that cares very much about what you do.
Dude, you pissed off Poll. You pissed off 4chan and 8chan with your cucking. That's not us. That has nothing to do with us.
Okay.
Our audience is not fucking with you.
Okay. Well, they say they are you. So I don't know how to differentiate. What am I supposed to do?
Yeah, because I'm a famous school shooter. That's why.
All right, listen. I think
if I can explain that a little bit.
Yes.
I don't know a ton about. I don't know the lore of Sam Hyde or $1 Million Extreme, so I only know this peripherally. But I believe Sam's audience would blame him for tragedies that would happen around the country, and use the phrase "he can't keep getting away with it," which I found very funny. So I guess when school shootings would come up, his audience would be like, "It's Sam Hyde." So again, that's Sam saying like, "They're not even nice to me." What do you think the internet is?
You and the audience can make you guys can make your own shit. This is the time where you guys can. Why do you need Adult Swim? Why do you need anybody? Your audience is ready. Your audience is ready to.
That's terrible.
Army, dude.
All right, I'm gonna hire Absolutely to produce my show.
Well, it doesn't work that way, unfortunately.
You should quit Adult Swim too, Tim.
Well, this is what I said when Gelman pulled that move.
They're anti-woman, aren't they?
But don't you understand?
dude, they're not hiring women. You got to take a stand. Now's the time.
Sam, see, the problem with me is that I am a nuanced, moderate guy. So I don't fall into. I'm not partisan in the way that I'm not an extreme guy. So if Gelman's going to say so you know what I mean, and that's fine. You clearly are. Gelman clearly is. That's not who I am.
Oh, is that still playing?
No.
Okay. So there's something there where Tim is talking about like just go do the thing on your own.
Why do you need that paycheck?
Why do you need when you could just put it on YouTube at a time where that hasn't really been proven yet? Just go completely innovate the industry. And that's what people were doing, where it's like, hey, Tony Hinchcliffe wasn't canceled for the Pang Dang thing because his podcast got more successful. See, no one's really canceled. And it's like, no. You were taking opportunities away from. They rose above, Shane Gillis became an arena act. Like a lot of these people were able to rise above, but you don't get to go like, what's the big deal with getting fired? And just go blaze a trail for a group of people that hasn't really done it yet. Just go to YouTube, post this stuff, and hope eventually you're making as much or more money than you were from this established thing that we've had for 50 years,
Exactly. That was the worst thing he said, I think.
That was tough to hear.
But we have our last clip, and it's entitled "All I Said."
Okay, well, so this is what bugged me. I had the defense locked in with Tim Heidecker, where I'm like, hey, that clip about going after the advertisers, that could easily be taken out of context. That's a very short clip. We don't know the full context. But Tim kind of wipes that excuse away right here.
You think, with this guy that's, a Nazi sympathizer or whatever, and white supremacist, and, just a misogynist and all this stuff. And I spent the year just getting pummeled by these people, pummeled and pummeled and pummeled. Hey, did you see that show, man? What do you think of that show? I said, I haven't seen it, And then finally, somebody just said, well, how can you support that? And I felt like, all right, well, if I'm going to say anything, I'm just say, listen, if you really feel strongly about this, the only thing that the network cares about is their ratings and the advertisers. So if you feel like you want to let your voice heard, it does no good to talk to me about it. If you want to, make an impact, that's where you would do it. At no point did I suggest that was what anyone should do. So they made a video. Where they kind of brought, I said, there's no evidence. And then they showed me bringing up something. And it's just the obsession of about me is frankly very humbling. I'm very honored by it.
Yeah, Tim is the victim again. But he's in a way saying like, it's like Charles Manson saying, listen, the girls asked me, what do we do to make a difference? And for a while I said, don't even try anything. And then I was like, well, if you really want to get noticed, here's what you do, like Tim saying that like, oh, I said nothing for a little while. And then I said, contact the advertisers. Big deal. Like he never quite grasped the impact that he had in all this. And I think that's probably what was frustrating to Sam. And again, we'll never know unless an executive comes out and speaks out about it. We'll never truly know what impact Tim played, or I should say what role Tim played in getting world peace taken off the air. But as a comedian, I feel he had the exact opposite take that he should have.
Correct.
Where you hear even there, and I think the worst part is that it comes from bitterness. A lot of when you hear like, oh, they're Nazis and they're misogynists and they're racist and all this, it comes from people on Twitter who aren't Sam Hyde or Nick Rochefort or Charles Carroll. Just random people on the internet are saying mean things to Tim. And it's like, so that's your proof that world peace was a racist show?
Right.
And I would say again to Tim, like as a creator, he goes after Kill Tony pretty hard. He made a sketch a few weeks ago, or a few months ago, as some of you are listening to this. But he made a sketch, a parody. It was Kill Timmy, I think it was called. And it was just a parody, like, people would walk up to do their minute, and Tim immediately would go, gay, Mexican. And it's like, that's a funny way to roast Kill Tony.
Mm-hmm.
some of it is clearly, you know how Norm Macdonald said, like, the reason Alec Baldwin's impression of Trump wasn't funny is because it was entrenched in hatred of the guy. If you're going to impersonate somebody, you kind of got to like what they do, even if it's in a mocking way.
Mm-hmm.
You see that with Tim doing Kill Tony. But at the very least, it's him trying to be funny and mocking something he hates. I'm all for that. Fucking go for it. I might even think it's douchey, but like your ability to do it, fucking go for it. Go crazy. It's terrific. Saying call the advertisers, I think, is where a lot of people do and should have a problem with this. I think it's anti-comedy to be like, I don't like this thing. Let's get it taken off the air. That's where it's wrong. And people get this misconstrued all the time where it's like, well, if I don't like something, you know, the best way to get my voice out there is hit them in their wallets. That's how they know to get it taken off the air. And my point is, why do you need it taken off the air? Tim and Eric, I've never watched their shit. Like, I've never watched the Adult Swim shows that Tim and Eric put on. And you know how I was able to do that my entire life? Just not watch Adult Swim when they were on the air. It's amazing how I was able to pull that off. So like this idea that like, well, if I don't like something, how am I going to get it off the air? You don't. You let it dissolve of its own momentum. You know, like if they were going to fail, terrific. And I got to tell you, if they were going to be great, if they were doing this neo-Nazi show that was really funny, there's nothing Brett Gelman is able to do about that. That's up to let people come to their own conclusions on that stuff. That's my way of thinking about it, but maybe you guys disagree. And if you do, sound off in the comments. I forgot to say at the beginning of this to subscribe to blindmike.net.
It's been on the screen the whole time.
Oh, thank God. Thank God that people know. Because, you know, if you want to support free speech, if you want to support creators like Sam Hyde, then go to blindmike.net. That's where all our links are, wherever you get podcasts. As well as if you're watching on YouTube, it comes out every Wednesday. We took the summer off, but if you were on Patreon, you got this episode like 2 or 3 months ago. So consider becoming a member on YouTube or Patreon, I should say, and you get early access. In this case, very early access. So consider doing that. You also get bonus content. We've done all sorts of wacky stuff over the summer. And since we haven't done it yet, I can't really tell you about it, but I'm sure it was terrific. So
I do enjoy that at the beginning of the show. You're like, this is the second time we've done it. We're going to gloss over everything. The only thing we've glossed over is blindmike.net.
Yeah, well, good. I prefer it that way because I actually really thought this was an interesting story. I'm glad people suggested it because I kind of thought when I hear things like this that I'm not too well versed in, like people are like, oh, you got to look up Sam Hyde and Tim Heidecker. You got to look into this. It seems like a daunting task to me.
Yeah.
And then, you know, maybe 2 or 3 clips in, I'm entrenched.
Hooked.
I'm like, oh, I'm hooked. I'm hooked into this. So I found it to be a really interesting story. So thank you to all of you that suggested it. And blindmike.net is the best way you can find links to contact me and make your own suggestions. Or leave them in the comments on YouTube. I'll look at those as well. So if you comment, like, subscribe, it helps more people find the show. So we appreciate you guys. Go to verygoodshow.org as well. Support Craig. Who knows what that'll be by the time this airs?
Who fucking knows?
I got to tell you, if you got a problem with Sam Hyde, don't go anywhere near verygoodshow.org. But if you like the kind of stuff that Sam represents, but think he isn't serious enough about it, then verygoodshow.org is the place for you.
That's right. And if you want to try to rehabilitate your love for Tim Heidecker, just go watch Tom Goes to the Mayor and try to forget about all this.
Yes, absolutely. So that's it, I think. And we'll talk to you guys next time on Why Are You Laughing?
Zip it up and zip it out.